By the time you hear the show, we will have just 1 month to race day. Wow, and that countdown means for a lot of folks who listen to the show, some starting line butterflies.
I am one of those people, Audie. No question about it. And race nerves, in my opinion, are part of the fun of the Leadville 100. But there are a couple of things our listeners should take off their list of things to fuss about at this point. The first one is, a month out from race day, it is time to stop messing with your bike setup. Put away the wrench, guys. That should be settled. It is time to stop experimenting, and it's time to start executing.
The other is your drivetrain and braking. With a month left before the race, you want to make sure that your chain is good, your brakes are good, your brake pads and rotors are good, and that anything that is some serious wear gets serviced or replaced.
Yeah, that stuff wears out. And you don't want to find out something needs fixing sometimes, during the afternoon of Friday, August the 11th. So make an appointment, go see a trusted bike mechanic, tip them well, and ask for Shimano parts for anything that needs replacing. This is not a race to cheap out for your parts.
And of course, we happen to know that Cycles of Life, our favorite Leadville bike shop, happens to be very well stocked with Shimano gear, just in case you do need to get something as you get close to race day.
Yeah, shop local, support your mechanic, service your bike with parts you can trust, and thanks so much to Shimano, which you will find at bike.shimano.com for being the title sponsor of this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. Season 6, episode 22 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, hottie to most.
I'm Fatty, and this episode, we are talking to Tamira Jenlink, race director for all of Lifetime's Leadville races, which is more, way more than just the big race, the Leadville 100 mountain bike race.
Yeah, 14 events in 7 weeks is how many events Tamira's got on her plate this and every summer. So we appreciate her taking an hour out of her hectic schedule just between the Camp of Champions and the Silver Rush races.
You've got a lot of questions for Tamira, and we are happy to ask them for you. But first, let's try answering a question ourselves.
Yahoo! What is a good strategy for staying ahead of the cutoff times?
What do the experts say about sleeping effectively at altitude, and what do you each do?
For Leadville, hardtail or full suspension?
Yeah, good question.
Leadville Frequently Asked Questions, LFAQs, where we boldly and confidently offer advice we should probably be keeping to ourselves.
Here's a good question posted by Kyle Webb on the Facebook Leadville page. He asks, what is the most effective or efficient way to be prepared, incorporated in your training, that is, for the hike-a-bikes? Now, I'm going to come right out and say I don't know if this is the most effective or efficient, but here's what I do. I hike on my rest day more or less without fail. It is great active recovery. It gets you fit in a different way. And let's face it, it is good for your soul.
It is, actually. I love the hikes. I think, walking with your bike is an obvious one. We should all be trying to do that since 99.9% of us will have to hike a bike. I would say this, anticipate. Like when you are out there on course, make sure even when you are slogging along and you know that the hike-a-bike is coming, keep your head up as much as possible and look ahead. First of all, at two things. Look at a spot where you think you might need to get off. Like, okay, that looks like the spot where I want to dismount. And also you want to be aware of the rider in front of you. Make sure you're not running into that rider and being forced off, right? You don't want to have happen too. And that just puts you into that frustration mode. Like, God, no, I have to walk now because this guy in front of me forced me to get off my bike. So anticipate having to get off your bike, I think, is a great tip for hike-a-bike sections.
I will agree with that and say, get off 1 second before you have to. You're at some point, when you are going to stall out and you are going to basically be burning a match, get off a second before that. It's not going to cost you any more time. You're not going to trigger a cramp. and you're going to be able to get back on the bike with perhaps the same speed and a little bit less effort. And then I think this is one that both you and I, Hadi, know, because the Queen of Pain has said this a million times to us: walk with purpose. When you are hike-a-biking, make sure that you are not just putting your head down and trudging at the speed that that you feel good about. You are still in a race. Keep moving fast. And that can mean, and it has meant many times for me, passing people while you are hike-a-biking. You absolutely can continue to pass people. You don't have to go at the speed that someone who has been defeated, basically, who has given up, is walking at. Go your own speed, and that can be fast.
Yep. Rebecca Rush, always a big part of this show, right? We want to thank her for her continuing contribution, even when her voice is not here. Thanks to Kyle for a great question for our LFAQ. And just so you know, we have a whole episode of your LFAQs before race day coming out. We'll be having a returning guest, Nate Whitman, pro racer, good guy, 20-time finisher of the Leadville 100, on for that episode. So that means we'll have about 55 years of Leadville experience between us.
That sounds like a group therapy session, to be honest. So we opened this show by reminding folks that the race being about a month out, now's a good time for you to look over your components. When you do that, be sure to take a good close look at the part of your bike that is actually going to be in contact with Leadville the whole day. Your wheels.
Yeah, if you're riding with Envy's M5s, you more than likely don't have much to worry about as far as the wheels themselves go. Envy's reputation for reliability is well earned, but it's nevertheless a good idea to test the spokes and rims just to be sure. And if you're not a pro-level mechanic, have one that is, go over those wheels.
And while you're at it, be sure to take a good hard look at one of the most important parts of the bike that has a real out-of-sight, out-of-mind problem: your rims tubeless tape.
Envy is a little bit obsessed with quality, and so designed this tubeless tape specifically for Envy rim widths and depths. One layer of taping gets you tubeless setup that is both easy and safe. Find your specific rim and corresponding width for your wheels at envy.com.
And while you're at it, maybe grab some fresh valve stems as well, just in case the ones that you currently have seen better days or are gummed up with sealant. You can never have too many of those. Check out Envy's tubeless accessories at Envy. That's ENVE.com.
And while we're on the just 1 month to race day theme and race preparation, don't forget to get your race day nutrition ordered now.
Yeah, obviously the place to make that order is thefeed.com/Leadville. They ship fast, so you're likely to have everything you need with time to spare. But seriously, this is an easy item to check off early, so do it now.
And to the box of tried and true products you've been training with and will want to race with, let us recommend an interesting new product to try and experiment with. It's Never Second C30 Ice Energy Gels.
I just tried these for the first time yesterday, Hadi. They are Otter Pop shaped, kind of, and made to be frozen. And they're delicious. They're not super sweet. They actually have a nice hit of salt. And of course, since they're frozen, they are very cold, which can be so nice in the middle of a hot ride or when you want to get on top of your carbs when you're recovering after a hot ride. So yesterday I was doing hill repeats on a sunny, hot road close to home. I thought I was smoked. And so I came home. I had one of those Never Second C30 Ice Energy Gels. And I tell you what, I felt good enough after that to head back out and do 2 more repeats. That's 2,200 feet of climbing that I would not have otherwise done.
Oh, you can try out these Never Second C30 Ice Energy Gels when you claim your $80 in annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville.
Tamira Jenlink is our guest this episode. She's into her 2nd year of running the many races and events that happen in Leadville each summer. There's the running and the riding, the race camps, the marathon, the Silver Rush, which is both running and riding versions on back-to-back days.
And of course, there are the main events, the Leadville 100 mountain bike and run, and the 10K tucked in between those 2 events. And Tamara's also working on her doctoral dissertation. So we appreciate her taking time to talk with us and answer our listener questions.
And kind of in this realm is where I want to start to talk about what feels like an important piece to me as a racer who's been out here many times on this course. Let's take care of each other.
Tamira Jenlink, welcome back to the Leadville podcast. It is great to have you here.
Thanks, guys, so much for having me back. I'm really excited to be here, too.
I'm going to start with some flattery. This came to us via our Slack channel, and I thought you should hear it. This is from Cat Baker McCready. He said, "Tell Tamira thank you." So we're doing it here in public. "Thank you from an MTB novice that probably had no business attempting the race last year. Thank you for embracing me into the Leadville family and not only making me feel welcome, but that I belonged." So that is a pretty good place to start. Honestly, we're going to get into a lot of tactics. We're a nerdy show, and we love talking about very specific things. But honestly, you bring a lot of heart to the race, and thank you for that.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Kat. That is so kind. And I think it's, we just finished camp again recently. And so those moments are so special and just what gets to happen in that time frame. So thank you for taking the time to send that in, Kat. I super appreciate it.
At your second full year as race director, is it everything you thought it would be going in?
It's everything and more. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Hadi.
Much, much more. So much.
The fire hose is waning a tiny bit, but pretty soon, just as you think it's waning, something comes from somewhere, right? No, it's good. It's still really good. And it's moments like these. And I say that to Kat directly, but to you guys for even taking the time to just share something from that side of things is, I feel very appreciative of that and very honored. And I think that's kind of while the fire hose goes, it's those moments at the finish line, it's those moments in the camp, it's all those moments where you just get to really connect with the humans and their purpose, their meaning, their passion, their reason for being there, their tears, their joy. Those are just priceless, precious moments.
Mm. And we should say, as we record, it is, I think, the day after the camp. And so you are still, you're still out of breath from a very full set of days on that. I don't think this show has ever really talked about the camp. So I want to detour onto that for just a second. Tell us the Leadville 100 Camp of Champions, how long is it? What can people expect from it? For folks who are interested in doing that as prep for the race next year.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Eldon. I'm actually really super stoked to talk about that. I feel like we just closed the weekend on a very special, camp itself. And from what I can tell, from everything I'm hearing from the folks who attended, maybe even one of our best yet. And I think part of that is really spectacularly about our guides. We really put a lot of emphasis. I spent time we had Rose Grant and Melissa Rollins. And then I had a couple other gentlemen join us as well. I started with Rose and Melissa on purpose, just with the sense of, let's really break down some of these barriers around access to all populations, and our female group in particular, but all populations. And from there, we kind of worked together for a while. Number of meetings. We brought in Trapper Steinley and Scott Tietzel, and the five of us, I guess, if I count myself, which I managed to do sometimes, even after camp, had a lot of conversation about how do we refine this further. And so your question is about all those, is about the length and the time and all those parts and pieces. But I think the guides were just spectacular this year. And the chance to kind of just name that, and a big thank you to all of them. And what we did is essentially structured it from the beginning to really give them some tools to work with, but a little bit more refined. And so you have 4 days of mountain bike camp, 3 that are the literal days. The 4th day is a casual shakeout ride on Sunday. But your first day, we have historically always done a descending clinic, and we did stick with that plan. But we started off with an hour discussion with these guides and really opened it up to our campers as well to hear what they were after. So we got to have some really good guidance from the campers themselves in terms of, hey, what do we want to get out of this time? And so descending clinic is relatively minor part of it in the sense of time, They spent a couple hours up there, but we also really focused this year a bit on kind of how the race structure is. I was interested in pacing a lot and thinking about when you tackle this race, how you really want to have as much left in the tank at the end as you started with. So we really structured the camp around that, which was super awesome as well. And, so the first day, the campers got limited to 3 loops. We ride up to Oro City, a little descent that we do in the 50 course. And usually they can ride as many laps as they want. And we watch this thing happen where, the group sync, the head, all that stuff kind of gets going. And everybody's racing out the pavers from retail store at 300 watts. And they're just not thinking, but so excited. And we just spent a little more time holding them back and really working on this idea of pacing and helping them go up and do 3 laps instead of 5 or 10 or however many they possibly could. Really work on those descending skills, but then come into days 2 and 3, which cover the entire course. So in day 2, they ride from Pipeline up to Columbine and back. And then on day 3, they ride from Retail to Pipeline and back. So they cover basically every inch of course. And it's a lot of miles. It's a lot of time. We went from snow on marathon weekend to 60, 70 degree days. And so that kind of heat up here is different than it is in other places. It's definitely intense. So they were getting a lot thrown at them in different ways from, really nice weather, but also has its impact because it's warm. But they cover all the course. And in that time, we come down to the last day and now we've kind of asked them to hold back and work on that pacing and come back to day 3 and then really, open it up as they will. And so I think all of those pieces in our guides in general, just the way that the guides work together, the way the guides were available to all the humans before and after, during, was a phenomenal weekend. And then we had a really lovely shakeout ride yesterday. And everybody's, gone home maybe a little bit more. The idea is feeling a little more confident, right? Getting to see parts of the course that you haven't seen before and or ask all those questions, like we've all been there that first time, if we can remember back, and all the things that plagued us in terms of what pack do I carry? How much do I eat every hour? What should I be riding? What should my limits be? And that energy, you can feel it as it builds. And so really getting to just spend some time with that. So I could go on ad nauseum. I think it was a spectacular weekend. And we were so stoked to have Melissa and Rose lead that.
Oh yeah, I'm stoked with your choice as well. I mean, Rose, we've had on this show a couple of times, as well as her coach, talking about that specific thing, pacing. And so it's awesome that is carrying through into the camp as well. So give me a sense, how many riders are there and how many guides?
This was a phenomenal year. We had, I think, 118 riders, 119 riders, and we had 21 guides. So it was really 1 to 5, and depending on who rode every day, sometimes it was even better odds than that. And it allowed the guides to really split up and move around groups and give different perspectives, because the other beautiful thing you get with all those guides is not just one group think on how to do it, but a lot of different perspectives on how to tackle it, so you can find the thing that really relates to you. And the other thing I will just name is, while we were I just feel so, honored and lucky to have those two kind of at the top end of things in terms of Rose and Melissa, and we had a couple of very strong males in there too with Scott and Trapper and a whole bunch of other guys. But we also had this whole spectrum, from middle of the pack, back of the pack, am I trying to finish? Am I trying to get a time? So there was somebody in there for everybody to relate with. And that's really the goal. Is we don't want this to be intimidating. We want it to be less than that. So it was a great weekend.
Okay, we're closing in on start line day. And of course, a lot of folks starting to think about their corral positions. This is still a big deal, even though we've, gone to wave starts. Folks still want to, move up if they can. And one of the issues that's come up, Tamira, is your new qualifier, which was Sea Otter, and folks are wondering about whether or not there might be an adjustment regarding corral positions and their qualifying times out of Sea Otter. One of our Slack channel members, Andrew Ryan, who's also wears our jersey proudly, by the way, out there on course, was wondering just the fact that, Sea Otter was longer, it had more climbing, yet required you to be about 30 minutes quicker than, say, like Tahoe to move up into a corral position. Do you know? Will there be any adjustments to the Sea Otter times as you folks get closer to race day?
I would not expect anybody. I would just want to let everybody know to not expect any adjustments in those times. And part of what you're going to start to see, I've been looking at these corral placements pretty closely over the last couple of years. And part of it is refining it so that we're consistent across all events. What you're probably going to see, and I'll go ahead and say this live here, is you will start to see some readjustment of some of the other events as well. So some of them have been living in those places, and we have more people in some of those corrals than actually fit the percentages that we want and need to have in those corral placements. So while I get it, I totally understand it, Andrew, and all the folks out there who are questioning it, like, where the heck did this come from? This doesn't make any sense. I totally get why it doesn't make sense. And we actually have more folks, percentage-wise right now, placed in those corrals, given the length, the number of humans, I'm sorry, not the length, but the number of humans in the Sea Otter Classic in that event. You know, I think we had 400 and some odd 35 or something, I want to say was the completing number versus say 1,100, 1,200 for the 100 mountain bike. And the percentages that we had in each of those corrals were super high. But what you're going to see is as we move through the next couple of years, I will begin to adjust all of them and look through some of those pieces and parts, and it's going to get a little harder, and it's not going to feel great to all of us. And it's like most things in the sense that it takes time to kind of see why and how, but some of our times are off, and some of our other events we're seeing stronger, faster riders. And so it's not just based on a comparison against, you can't compare Sea Otter with the 100 mountain bike. Those are two completely different events, first off. And so what it takes to complete that is a different, element and a different rider to some degree. So the answer is not necessarily what we would all hope for, that sure we'll get those changed or there'll be some adjustment there, but that actually we're probably going to see an overall adjustment across all events.
Okay. So in other words, Tahoe will become more like Sea Otter as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, and what you may or may not realize, even, for example, the Silver Rush here in Leadville for a number of years was more stringent in terms of its times than some of the other events. And so I started to kind of look at those closely and work with Melly and work with a couple of our folks and, making sure that it's not in a silo, that we all agree about where we're going and what we're doing and how we're pacing those. It's not meant to be easy to get into the Gold Corral. There's not meant to be, oh, look, here's the one event out of all of them. You should go to this one because this is the one you can get into that corral. And I think all of us have known that there are certain events that are maybe more in our wheelhouse to go to, or just have felt more lenient. And so we're just working to get consistency across all of them.
Yeah. So will it become more difficult so what it sounds like is it's going to be more difficult to get into the Red Corral. It might be more difficult to get into the Green Corral, and it's going to propagate out through all the races. How about for people who are asking, right? I imagine in the past, Quinn must get 10,000 people saying, hey, I did really well in this other, non-qualifying race. I've been training super hard and think I deserve to be in the silver, so forth. Is there going to be more restriction on this sort of semi, I guess, open to lifetime's judgment admission into different corrals as well?
I don't want to jump on a definitive answer on that. That's something that our whole team needs to be involved in and be a part of that, definitive answer. And I think we all are on the same page as we know. I mean, we do. I get emails. We have a new athlete services person. Quinn used to get a ton of those emails as well. Hey, I know I can race here. I know I can do this. And we get, here's the hows and whys. And we're reviewing all those pieces, to make sure people are in the correct corral. Some of it's around safety as well. If you end up in the wrong corral, your potential for an accident right out of the gates it goes up significantly. So it's looking at all the spectrums across, looking at every element across the spectrum in terms of safety, numbers in those corrals. And the reality is these are sold out events, and we need to place those corrals consistently and equally too. We know that the white corral has been an issue for a number of years, and we're working towards how we mitigate that as well as balance out what these corrals look like.
Is there any change to white corrals for this year from last year?
Not currently. There is potential for that to shift a bit moving forward, but currently it's still going to hang tight right where it was as we look at the overall process and how we even out all of the corrals and ensure that we have some kind of consistency again that matches across all of them.
Yeah, the thing with white, you folks must be considering like how to properly seed there, right? If there's maybe a better way than than the alarm clock race, which is kind of how it works now, right? You get up early, you get the front of the corral. Is it possible that you folks might look at, people's existing licenses or other events they've raced as a way to find a seed in white or any corral for that matter?
I think there's always a way to refine everything, at the end of the day. And
okay,
we can add more colors, maybe that's what it is. I have certainly considered, and for me, it's strategic. It's like, let's not take on everything at once. Let's try to refine these pieces 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time and continue to, we got to a place where we at least have 3 waves of white so that we're not just this whole big pile of white going out. And that can use further refinement. And I think it is really a matter of the whole corral system and not just white. So I think that piece is on the docket for discussion, but we're not there yet.
Before we get away from qualifiers too, this is one we've brought up consistently with any lifetime person we've had on here, and that is the need for a qualifier in the Southeast. So we're going to keep asking because because our listeners ask, because people on the Facebook participants page always ask. I realize there's now a qualifier in Arkansas, but the Southeast, the kind of that Eastern Atlantic seaboard right there, seems to be void of a qualifier at this point. Is there any further discussions? Anything you could tell the listeners at this point about another qualifier for folks along the East Coast?
It's not on the docket right now, so nothing to report on that yet, but I do appreciate the consistency. And what I really appreciate, I think, is continuing to look at ways that we can make this as accessible for everybody as we can. And again, on my radar as well, it's like, how many things can we tackle at a time? And how many things can I tackle inside of 2 years? But it's definitely, I think it's a question mark for sure.
Yeah, I will say that refinement of changes that you've made and just sort of getting them so that they're really nailed down is a great way to go. If you change 50% of the course or change 50% of the rules every time, everything remains in chaos. So yeah, get things nailed down. I feel like the wave system is, that was a big enough change that just making little refinements for a little while is a great idea. Thinking of refinements, are there other course changes, any refinements to the course or to aid stations? Remember, we talked a little bit about the possibility of a pipeline alternate a while ago. I would love to know if there are changes to the course or access to the course this year.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a good question too. And just to back up for a second, I think, to see 2 years of this white wave and really see what is the piece that we want to shift. And I'm of that nature. Like, I don't like to tackle everything at once, and I don't like to change it all every year. So, change a few things, watch them, see how they work, and then really understand what makes the next best thing. Instead of being reactive, we want to be proactive, and we want to be making decisions from a knowledgeable place. With that in mind, the focus has continued to be around safety. So one big change this year that I am super just pleased with, it's been a lot of effort from the Sheriff's Department, County Roads and Bridges, city police as well, but a lot around the county aspect, because we've known that this section of County Road 10, every single one of us who's ridden this course has probably at one time or another come back from Twin Lakes and come down the dirt before you get back to where you normally would go back on the single track, but now we go further. But we've all, one time or another, gone way too fast and come around those corners way too fast. So we have been able to successfully get a section of that where the biggest risk factors are closed during the event this year. So this will be the first time that we have, basically you'll come out of the single track, a little bit of pavement onto the dirt, and just past that, it'll be closed to traffic throughout the race to just at the very top of that climb before you drop down into Twin Lakes. So that's one piece that I feel like that those are the pieces that are taking a little bit of extra time to get everybody on board. Because when you start to close down roads, public roads in the middle of events, it has a lot of potential impacts in different arenas. So it involves a lot of humans to have in that conversation. So that's one area that we put some real focus on in terms of just increasing safety in that area. So that's one change this year. We'll stick with, I was pretty excited to have us have all riders on Harrison. We'll stick with that plan. we've continued to kind of tighten up how we support that, because it is quite a lot to close Harrison even for 2 hours and make sure that your traffic is routed right, to make sure they're not crossing over, that you're just keeping everybody safe in that process. So we have refined that a bit, and we will see a little more support from the Colorado Rangers. So we'll see a little more uniforms on course. We will continue to see an increase of course marshals to help protect those intersections, and just do everything we can. We try to remind everybody. I will remind everybody at the racer meeting. I put it in the athlete guide. These are public courses. This is motorists and cyclists interacting, and we need to be really thoughtful about that. And it really only takes one, you're on the wrong side of the line, and things can go south pretty quickly. So we're going to do everything we can to remind people, but also increase that safety with more support in that arena. And then that County Road 10 closure, I feel really good that we've gotten through that hoop.
That is a fast section coming home. In fact, it's usually kind of a relief coming down that hill after you've climbed up out of Twin Lakes inbound.
Well, and it's a dirt road, so you don't realize you're too far to the left or right or whatever, and so.
And you're a little, what do you call it, Fatty? At that point in the race, you're a little race dumb?
Oh, yeah, race stupid. But I absolutely have no cognitive skills at all at that point. I am a motor and a set of eyes and a little bit of a prayer. But I do want to come back. I asked you a million questions at once, but the idea of the pipeline alternate, I can't get it out of my head.
Nothing in the works on that right now. I will tell you, and something I'm going to go ahead and throw out to your audience, and so welcome if you get some feedback on this, Hottie, Fatty. Let me get all my names right.
Call me whatever you want. It's fine.
Hey, whatever you want. One thing that we've been really working on our partnership with Outward Bound. And so another thing that I have considered and that I'm discussing with them, they're under a land trust, they're under conservation easement, but where the run goes through, that we would look at putting the bike going through there next year, so that it would actually not go around on the Highway 300 to the corner of County Road 11, but it would actually come through as the run does, right through the Outward Bound property and dump out onto County Road 11. So I'm curious to hear any feedback that your audience might have around that. That's a safety issue that I think there's this piece we're trying to work on, really increasing our awareness around shuttles and impact around driving. And Outward Bound is a wonderful partnership in the sense that we have a lot of room to work with to park people and to create some alternatives there as to kind of what you're alluding to in terms of alternate aid stations as well as support, and being able to utilize that where it pulls them. It's not on the outbound, it's on the inbound when they come through that corner coming back, then they're crossing over traffic. But I also just think riding through there makes so much more sense in a lot of ways. But welcome some input. That's not the answer directly to the pipeline alternate, but it's in that vein and headed in that direction.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, we'd love to hear from our listeners on that one. If you are kind of wondering, I think I've got it right, I know what kind of outbound better than inbound, but if you go past the fish hatchery and then you kind of turn east, you're going eastbound on the pavement there, you turn right off of that pavement into dirt, if I've got that correct, Tamara, right? That's where they turn right and into the dirt and then cut more directly across towards pipeline. Is that kind of the general area?
So a little less time on pavement is what we do.
A little less time on pavement. It decreases some risk factors that we have at that corner on the inbound. And overall, I think it increases the opportunity for support in that area as well. So being able to put crews and teams in there and increase a crewing spot that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Well, less road to a former roadie like me, I'm like, oh, I love the road. Come on. And another thing the roadies love are aero bars. We race in aero bars. Of course, this year there'll be no aero bars at the Leadville Trail 100 for pros or for anybody who's entered the event. And to be honest, Tamara, I don't think in the years I've been there, Fatty, you could say otherwise, I never saw a lot of aero bars in the race. I'm sure there were some. And the feedback that we've gotten through the podcast and we've seen online hasn't been so much about the aero bars, but that the rule also affects bar ends, bar ends, which a lot of folks like to use. They like to place bar ends inboard of their grips and kind of use them as hoods like you'd have on a road bike. And other little add-ons people like to use to relieve some of the hand pressure or the hand tension that comes about from riding a race that event. So could you clarify for us what will be in and what is out to the best of your ability as far as this new aero bar rule goes?
So anything aero bar, extension, etc., is out. So anything in the center part of your handlebars, your traditional bar ends, totally acceptable. So something that's outside of the grips that goes into the ends, totally fine. That is the distinction that we're making at this point. And nothing, I would just say anything center of the grip would not be allowed. It is accurate on the website under the rules, under info. And that language is now, in the interest of safety, aero bars or clip-on inner bar extensions are no longer allowed at Leadville Race Series mountain bike events. Traditional bar ends located outside of the grip are still permitted. We need to stick with that, and that will not create any issues at this point. And then if somebody has, something that they really want us to review, please send it forward, and we'll sit back with the team. And if we need to make some additional language adjustments, we will do that. But for now, that's the rule that we're living with.
Some folks, Tamira, will try to wrap the middle portion of their handlebars so they can find a new grip there. What about adding bar tape to the middle section of your flat bars and finding a grip there?
Hadi, I don't really see any issue there. Where I want to stick is really within the realm of what our languaging says. We are staying away from the aero bars, the clip-on inner bars, etc. Bar ends are good, traditional bar ends outside of the grip. And then getting into policing something beyond that in terms of tape and foam and, something that makes it more comfortable, that is not my area of issue. And I don't see that as something that we would be concerned about.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like that was the spirit of the rule to begin with. I think it was more, right, people being laid out like a time trialist and looking like they belong in the Tour de France and not the Leadville Trail 100 and endangering other people in the process.
It really came down to safety and really looking at and trying to mirror and match what all other standards are doing, from USA Cycling to all of our kind of national standards, international standards as well, and trying to match that and mirror that, particularly when we have a pro contingency out there, but across the board for safety. I mean, we definitely sat there and talked about, are we just doing this with the pros? Are we just doing this? And the reality is we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to be taken care of.
We'll get back to Tamira in just a moment, but first, Hadi, I want to pose a question not a lot of racers or their families give a lot of thought to. What are you going to wear in the evenings on, the days before you race when you're in Leadville, or when you're at the starting line, or when you're walking to the coffee shop early in the morning, or as it gets towards 6:30 in the evening and you're in the shade looking down the road for your racer. Mm-hmm. It gets cold in Leadville.
Yeah, a bathing suit would be the wrong answer. When you're up above 10,000 feet, there's a very good chance that you're going to get cold at some point before or after the race. When that happens, it's nice to have a nice down cycling jacket, whether you're on the bike or just walking around town.
Yeah. The owner of DNA Cycling, Joe Sepulveda, recently told me the Spectator down jacket is one of his personal favorite items that they sell, and I can see why. It is water repellent. It is super soft. It has nice hand warmer pockets. It has a great insulated hood built right in. It is just a great jacket for watching the race across the sky or for warming up after.
Spectator. That describes me. Check out the Spectator down jacket and all of DNA Cycling's premium and custom cycling gear at dnacycling.com.
Now back to Tamira and one of her big projects since becoming the Leadville race director. Let's talk about shuttles for a sec. Last year, I think, was the first time at least for the Leadville 100 mountain bike race that we did shuttles. How'd that go? Are there changes you're going to be making this year? And I have kind of a follow-up on that afterward.
I think we're off to a good start. I think, as I envisioned, this was a 2 to 5 year process to engage people. You're offering them something that hasn't been true. I mean, we're in the 40th year of the run this year. For 40 years, people have not been doing that. So we've had very simple shuttle system for the stage race, and that's it, pretty much. And so we introduced something that I believe is going to take 2 to 5 years. From a community standpoint, I've heard, thank you, positive feedback. We have a lot of room for growth, and what we will continue to do this year is, particularly with the run is the big one, but the mountain bike as well, the 100 mountain bike, we had shuttles running for the marathon. We'll have shuttles running this weekend for Silver Rush. But it's really these two big races where we have so many folks scattered about trying to get from one end to the other, with the hope that we eventually do move to either a full shuttle system, and that's where a partnership with Outward Bound is a very important relationship, having places where we can actually park enough vehicles. But right now, I think we're just training humans that this is available, and we're refining our ability to execute it well so that they can rely on it and trust it. And with all things, it takes a minute. I think it was successful in its, infancy, but it has room to grow and become even more vital and more important to what we're doing.
So the follow-up I had on it was a lot of crews want to be able to get between the aid stations, not just from the start line to an aid station and then back to the start line. Is there any plan to get someone on a shuttle from Twin Lakes to the pipeline?
Yes. 100%, and actually refining that this year. So hopefully we will have, that's part of this whole discussion on Outward Bound too, is if we get to that point where it's Outward Bound, now we suddenly have a great place to park folks and move the shuttle easily, not just from Outward Bound, but to pipeline and then over to Twin Lakes. I'm going to go ahead and increase that, and we'll dedicate a shuttle this year in that arena so that we can start to build that knowledge base and use base and just patterning so people understand that it's really there. And then hopefully we do work through some of these pieces to even increase where we can park folks out in that arena beyond pipeline, because as we all know, pipeline eventually becomes well overparked and overburdened in that way. So having Outward Bound as an option there would be amazing.
We did get one question from Andy Day regarding the crew areas, and he was just wondering if there's any chance that some type of reservation system might be possible in the future. Or look, you're thinking about a lot of stuff. Here comes some more. A reservation system for crew spots at Twin Lakes or Pipeline or both, or any possibility there?
Well, Andy, I think that's a great question. And I think it's a possibility.
I love the idea.
I tend to look at things from all angles. And, like this year, one of the things we changed is we said, hey, we're going to open all volunteer registration slots on March 1st. So we're not going to have some race going to get to the most favorite spot or shift, and people don't know that it's happening. We're going to make this like a formal registration process. And by doing that on March 1st, which is when it launched, on March 1st, within 2 hours, we had probably 500 people had jumped in and gotten there. But everybody had a fair shot at it. So part of what I get out of this idea is that similar concept of how do we set up, a fair opportunity that could decrease. And I don't think it's out of the question. I think it's something that is worth entertaining. It's not maybe going to happen in the next year or so. And I do think part of it becomes about how much we can manage. How much can we manage in terms of creating those spots, getting them dedicated to where their spot is. You're talking about hundreds of people out there. So now we have to create little boxes and little numbers and all those pieces. Not necessarily out of the question, and an interesting idea. And I think, Andy, we might bring you into the brainstorming session.
That's what happens when you raise your hand. Yeah.
That's right. Might as well get involved, right? I think all of it, and I'll just say this, I think, we're all thinking in the same vein. How do we make this an equitable experience for all and decrease our impact on places like Twin Lakes and the community of Leadville? We are moving deep into our summer where the impact on this town, with 2,700 humans, and at any given moment, during Mountain Bike Week, we could have 7,000 in addition to that. We've all felt it on the saturation of Wi-Fi. We've all felt it, particularly people who live here, thinking, okay, so for the next 2 weeks, I'm not going to eat because there won't be anything at Safeway. We feel it in so many different arenas. And I think a continued discussion, a continued path forward is around how do we decrease those elements of impact and increase the overall experience for everybody.
Tamira, I don't know if you've looked at the sky recently, but there is a lot of smoke coming in from Canada as we talk. Last year, there was a lot of smoke coming from California. The year before that, I couldn't see because of the wildfires in Colorado. Smoke can be a problem, I think, is where all this is headed. And people worry about it. I worry about it. And so I'm curious, what are you doing as far as looking at smoke and other weather conditions? And is there a threshold beyond which the race doesn't happen?
I think that's a great question. And I will back up a second and just say, last year I think I shared with you that I was able to bring in our local search and rescue team to handle all of our medical. And by doing that, it's a team that knows everything in their own backyard. They know their topography, all those pieces super well. So they're not only handling, for example, on the mountain bike where we do see a few more calls, they're not only handling the responses, but they're handling the aid stations. So they are handling everything. So in that same vein, this year, along with that kind of County Road 10 piece we talked about earlier, the Sheriff's Office, County Roads and Bridges, City Roads and Bridges, the police department, the commissioners, like all of us have really worked hard at looking at how do we strengthen some of these things. And we have Claire Skeen back in the kind of the OEM role, which we didn't have for a year there. And it's been great to have her in that role. And through that process, we've actually, to get to your point here, as we've been kind of tightening up all these pieces, we are now working closely with NOAA out of Pueblo. So they are Clint, I'm not going to think of his last name right now. I'm sorry, Clint. And he is amazing. His team is amazing. So essentially, we tried this out in the marathon. We're going to do it again this week. I'll meet with weather with them. We'll meet with our sheriff's office, with our OEM office, and myself Wednesday night this week. We'll get a lowdown on what we're looking at. Of course, we're looking at beautiful weather this weekend. Then again on Saturday morning and Sunday morning, since we have 2 days this weekend, pre-race. And then they're texting us, they're updating us. Here's what's going on. Here's what you're seeing. And what I was most concerned about with the marathon, of course, is exposure and lightning. We've seen some years where that's been a risky factor. And I think you bring up a really good point. Smoke is another factor. Air quality is another factor. Overall, just weather and fire itself are factors. And now by having this team together, we have a system in place to make a decision altogether that is county-wide decision. And it's not just a race series making a decision, but we're all making it unilaterally and in a unified command type approach, which to me feels much better than just one individual saying, hey, I think that's bad. Let's do this, And I can look at the numbers and go, sure, we're in orange, we're in red, we're moving into purple, whatever. We're above 200 on our air quality. And we can make decisions there. But in this vein, we get to make a decision, I think, that's much more intelligent. It's much more educated. And it's much more informed across all of our county and our region, and having those experts involved in that decision.
So I guess I'm going to circle back around and say, so is there a world in which this race doesn't happen? I guess. Sure.
100%. 100%. I think we're always going to have to make a call. One of the things that we were really hammering out with the marathon this year is, previous to the fact that we had too much snow to be up on Mosquito Pass, after we shoveled 2 miles of snow, we were really hammering out what our protocols are around lightning. And it's true of everything. There is going to be a point where, we either have a delay or we call it. And that has to do with keeping everybody safe. And certainly we're going to match what our public health world is saying here locally as well, which we know that when we move into kind of that above 200 range, that we are now kind of looking at that area. And, you get into I guess it's purple and maroon, right? And your public health is starting to make decisions. And if we were in that arena, I don't really necessarily I'm not going to knock on wood and not going to jinx anything, but Leadville sits in such an interesting place. This year we didn't have quite the same snow. We just had colder weather longer. And I think the same thing is interesting with where we sit and how the smoke funnels, that we haven't been faced with this decision just yet, but absolutely people's health. And then I think right before that, there's sensitive populations who need to be making educated decisions for themselves, even if we're not calling it like it's, the air quality is in the orange or red, and we haven't called it because our county and us don't see together that we're at that risk factor. We still need to make educated decisions for ourselves if we have known immunity, allergy, sensitive, lung issues that our athletes also need to be making decisions for themselves that keep themselves safe until we get to that point. But we will absolutely, in the spirit of safety and the absolute need for safety and the athlete experience, we'll make that call if we need to.
Speaking of outdoors, as I recall, the pre-race meeting was moved outdoors. I think that was a COVID move, if I'm not mistaken. Now it's stuck, right? Are we sticking with that?
We're sticking with that. Have you been there? Come on, it's so amazing.
Oh, yeah, I've been there twice, at least, 3 times, yeah. And then another new little change last year that I'm assuming will be back is that we get our buckles in the chute. That's staying the same?
It was, I think, a huge success. It cut down on a lot of different misses. That was really the goal, was let's not miss the humans with their buckle. Let's make sure you just busted your butt for however long you took in the training process. Your crews and family did too. And then you execute this thing, and now you walk out of that chute with that buckle in your hand. And on top of that, we're just having less time delay on them being shipped or whatever after that. So huge win there, I think.
So far in this conversation, Tamira, it's been a little bit selfish, right? We've been asking you, like, what can you do for us? What can you do for us? Now let's sort of flip that on its head and ask, what can we do for Leadville? What does Leadville need? Us racers and our crews, all the people that come with us as we descend on this community, to be welcome? And what do we need to stop doing?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. It's a constant question. And my first piece would be that I would just say a huge thank you. I know that last year, and many different platforms, I put it out there about how to kind of show up in Leadville and how we can take care of this community in this backyard. And I feel like so many humans did. And I felt like I heard so much from our athletes around wanting to embrace that. And so just a big shout out and thank you on that. And really, I think it's in the same place. It's continuing to recognize that, Ken and Marilee have been shepherding this idea of family for 40 years. They've been championing it. They've been building it, and it's true. And like family, when we come here, it's like a reunion. And I think even if you're coming for the first time, you haven't seen your family ever before, you will on this weekend. And how we show up in that, if we can think about it from that vein of this is family and how can I be my most gracious self in that, that's really it. It's take that extra 2 seconds to pick up the piece of garbage. It's, talk to the human in front of you that you're wanting to pass and tell them what a great job they're doing. Not just about our community, but also about the other people on the course with you, about all the crews and about all the spectators and family members out there. And in our community, stop in and say a thank you to these folks. I think that goes a million miles. Go get a cup of coffee at City on the Hill, or stop in, at any one of our fabulous restaurants, any one of our fabulous galleries, shops, and just take that extra second to say thank you. And I feel that from you all. I feel that from this group, that it is a family and it is that piece, and that you do show up with that. And so mostly I'm saying thank you. And the reminder is just to continue doing that. And that piece goes a million miles to when one of us here who lives here just wants to go buy a block of cheese and there's no cheese at Safeway, or, those things happen. And I think that awareness of how big we are and how big the footprint is that we create by coming into town, and how much the traffic is and all those different impacts it's felt. And we now are, Ken and Marilee championing this for 40 years. We're 14 events over 7 weekends. That's a big deal. And it's incredible. And it's an incredible kind of summer long reunion. And if we can continue to bring our kindness with us and just recognize that there's a whole lot going on here. And the other thing that I will offer, and it's kind of my thing for this summer, is thinking about everything that each of you has put in. All of our athletes, you put in so much into these events. And not only how we show up in Leadville, but I think the other piece that comes up for me is, how do we make this about something bigger than just our event, our race, our time? We have all these crews, all these families out there supporting us. It's phenomenal. So a big thank you to all of them. But then also, how do we take back whatever's happening for us out there? Like, things are happening. We're changing. We're becoming different humans as we do these pieces. And how can we integrate that not only in how we show up in Leadville, but everywhere. And I'm throwing that out there just as also something to think about when you get in those long miles and it gets a little dark and the demons start to show up on your shoulder and make you wonder if maybe your tire will flatten out or your chain will break and you can't ride anymore and you'll have a good excuse on how to stop this thing. And you can remember why you started it and remember why you're here. And that's about Ken and Marilee too, in terms of their idea of family and changing ourselves and being better selves, not only in Leadville, but everywhere.
Yeah, a fantastic reminder. Absolutely. I'm at a little bit, maybe more sort of like practical level as well. It feels difficult anymore for me to there is anything more I can do as far as, putting my money into Leadville, right? The whole original reason for the race is, as Ken tells the story, is, bring people into Leadville, have them stay at a hotel, have them stay at the restaurants, have them buy groceries at the grocery store. And anymore, it's pretty difficult to do any of those things, right? My kids this year are staying in Frisco because I could not find a place I could afford in Leadville to stay for them, right? So they're driving half an hour to come see the race. The restaurants are all beyond capacity. Have we outstripped what Leadville is able to handle? Or are there ways that we can still support the citizens of Leadville as we come in to do this race?
Well, that's a nice, simple question.
Well, that's why I'm here.
We got a couple more hours for this discussion. Do you know about my EDC hat? So I'm also sitting as the president in our EDC, our Economic Development Corporation right now. And so this is a question mark across a lot of different avenues, and not just the race series has a huge impact. And we are, as a community, a county, a city, looking at how we are growing Leadville to actually accommodate the change and the growth that's happening. And the races are a big part of that. Ken and Marilee, well done. Your goal was successful, and absolutely, these races were built out of the vision of trying to bring economic vitality into the community when it was in such a difficult state with the mine closing. And most certainly that has occurred. COVID has certainly strengthened that as well. And I think today, the struggle is, some of the things I would say is make sure that your Airbnb is actually legitimately licensed. Like some of the things you can do to really support the community or help us move along. We're working on some lodging feasibility studies and we're working on additional lodging. So hopefully in the next 2 to 4 years, you're going to see a nice hotel out there in addition to, if not 2 or 3 of them. And we're working solidly as a community in terms of our identity with outdoor recreation and supporting not only races, but other forms of outdoor recreation, and balancing that with where do people stay, where do they eat, and balancing that with how do we keep people working and living in Leadville. So there's a lot of pieces and parts to this puzzle that you're touching on, Fatty. And I think the short-term answer is continue to come and be here, and please hold your patience together because we are a big impact. And I think we're working to catch up with some of those parts, and we're also taking a little minute to do it in the way that is most aligned with Leadville. And Leadville has, I think many of us know, is very clear that it doesn't necessarily want to be like any of the other neighboring communities. It wants to hold on to its roots and to some of that richness from the mines and from that time period, the historical nature, but also just the rough and rugged grit and determination, and all those layers. And that means we're not just going to turn into one giant development. And so your patience in this process is huge as well. And just sort of that awareness that we're all a part of the issue, in some moments. And if we can be kind with each other and patient and know that we are moving towards solutions to those areas, our numbers are not going to increase in these races. They're going to stay solid. So we know what that piece is. We know when the lottery happens. We know when things get announced. We know when we can book things. And to the best of our ability, I think we just continue to be kind of consistent and kind there and patient. And as a community, we're going to meet you with more lodging opportunities and more availability. I know that that's been a struggle. It's a struggle not just in these 7 weekends, but But I think part of it for us is to not get frustrated when we come into town. And this is little old Leadville. And there's something about that name when you hear it that brings something up for everybody and something special that makes you want to be here. And if we can hold on to that, we're working to hold on to it and create that same, keep that same culture of Leadville as we move forward and create more opportunity for lodging and infrastructure around those pieces. Not sure if I got you the answer, but I don't think there is one right now. Fatty, it's a work in process.
I mean, hang tight, right? Things change. It is a lot different than it used to be, right?
It's a lot different. I mean, I've been coming in and out of Leadville since I was 4 years old. It's a very different world, right? And just that reminder to all of us that we want to get somewhere fast on the course. We're not going to get somewhere fast on the course. And I'm going to work really hard at the shuttle system over the next 5 years to the point where we can have a reliable system in place. You can park your car and you can get on that shuttle and get where you're trying to go and decrease the frustration, because I know all of you want to get there to support your teams, to support your athletes as well. There's a lot of layers to it, and we've got to try to look at it through all lenses possible and take everybody into account.
Well, Tamira, as always, fantastic conversation with you. I appreciate, honestly, it becomes even more clear during this conversation what a time of transition you are helming this Leadville race. So, thank you for your work on it. I'm going to echo what we had Kat say at the beginning. You're doing an amazing job, and look forward to seeing you on the course.
I look forward to seeing you guys too here soon. Thank you so much for having me and continuing the conversation.
I can't wait to see all of you start and come back home. Super excited to spend this time with you. Thank you for staying the course those 18 months, showing back up, and let's go dig deep, and let's go get it tomorrow. Yeah!
Again, thanks to Tamira Jenlink. I really feel like she's doing everything she can to make the huge number of people that come to Leadville fit into the race and town while still honoring the tradition of the race.
I totally agree, and that is a tough job. Let's go ahead and wrap this episode. We have a Slack channel if you have questions for us, leadville.fm/Slack. Our response times are generally measured in minutes, not days. If you've got a question, give us a shout there.
And we're both on Facebook as well as Instagram for me. I am at Michael Houghton on IG.
Yep, and I'm on Strava. Browse over to leadville.fm/Fatty to find me. To see all the ways you can find this independent show, it is leadville.fm.
Good luck in your riding, racing, and recovery. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next month at the starting line.